Welcome to Chapter 27, Toward Abstraction, the Modernist Revolution, 1904 to 1914. We have survived the turn of the century, and now we're going into the beginning part of the 20th century up to World War I. We have a lot of scientific inventions and discoveries. Don't worry, we won't go through all of them. But some are very important, like 1902, Ernest Rutherford discovers radioactivity. 1913, Niels Bohr discovers that the atom is made out of protons and neutrons. And Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. These are all important innovations during this time. The other thing that will become very important to art is Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis. It's actually going to become more important in the next chapter, but know that he is living and working during this time as well. The one thing you have probably already noticed is that these art movements have gone from hundreds of years in length to much shorter and shorter periods of time. That's going to continue. We're going to have this very fast-paced world here. So we're going to have these new and exciting and innovative art movements that last a year or maybe 2 or 3, but that's it. And then everyone's going to move on. So this is kind of the world that we're moving into. So we're not talking about hundreds of years. We might be even talking about just months. Let's start with Fauvism. Fauvism means wild beast. This has to do with art critic Louis Bruxelles and his description of some of the artwork at the Salon d'Automne as an orgy of pure colors. So the Salon d'Automne was a venue for avant-garde artists, and so we have this group of artists using color very expressively, and this starts with Henri Matisse. It starts in 1905, but is ended by 1908, so again, very short. With Henri Matisse and Femme au chapeau, or Woman with a Hat, we see that he is arbitrarily assigning colors. So obviously, this is not realistic. A woman does not have green and blue face. We don't normally have this many colors for a background or even her dress. So these are obviously randomly assigned colors. But we still have an image of a woman wearing the contemporary clothing, with a fan, with an elaborate hat. We can definitely still tell what he is depicting, even if the colors might not be what we consider normal. André Derain, Mountains at Collioure. Alright, so again, we have these kind of odd color choices. So in nature, you don't see a lot of trees with red or almost a coral red bark. And the colors assigned to the leaves, the background, again, not necessarily true to life. This piece is very, very flat. We have everything being abstracted almost to shapes, especially in the background. The sky and the mountains seem to be abstracted into shapes rather than to more detailed landscape. Derain thought of landscape as a vehicle for joyous color and surface design. He really thought of color in a non-representational role, as you can tell. Here's another Matisse piece. This is Le Bonheur de Vivre, the joy of life. But we still have these bright, sometimes nonsensical colors being used. But we also see some influence by Gauguin in this piece, and some of the nudes and then the natural setting. We also see that the figures are not necessarily perspectively correct. What I mean by that is here in the frontal plane, these figures should be the same size as this figure. This is not accurate, being in the same plane and being so wildly different. Same with this middle plane, that we've got these figures in a wide range of sizes here. And then, of course, we've got these in the background. So we've got each figure is almost separate. Again, it kind of has this feel of that they're, it's like a magnet board. These are just kind of being added on there without regard to where they are in the painting itself. We can also see the Matisse is increasing his abstraction in this piece, especially with the background and the trees becoming just lines and blocks of color. What detail there is all in the figures. Even there, if you notice, most of the figures are actually very simple line drawings. So if you notice, a lot of the figures, we're only talking about a couple lines, an outline, a line here or there to differentiate body parts, and that's it. Here's another Matisse. This is the Red Studio. If you notice, we've been going further along in time as well. This is 1911. In this case, he's created his studio, painting the majority of it red, with really only his paintings and some of his props being other colors. This is allowing these items to almost float in the space. The other interesting thing in here is that the white that you see is not actually added. That's actually canvas showing through. So what he's done is he's actually allowed the white canvas to show through on some of this white versus actually painting on there. The other thing you'll notice is that we've got these very simple outlines of some of the furniture, the chair and the dresser and clock and things. Very simple outlines that we have. By the way, in case you're curious, these pieces on the wall and on the floor, yes, they represent some of Matisse's own works. Cubism. So this is the second movement we're going to talk about. Cubism is all about the essence of a piece visually, about getting a piece from various angles at the same time. Pablo Picasso was born in a Spanish town of Malaga on the Mediterranean coast. His father had been a painter. When he was 15, he moved to Barcelona to attend the Escuela de Belles Arts, and he actually started out in the Symbolist style. He ended up moving to Paris in 1902, and later he moved to Barcelona and moved into the, quote, red light district. Of course, this tends to be the cheaper district, and he was a young, struggling artist, so that makes sense. We have this piece, widely considered to be the first true Cubist piece, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, or the Young Ladies of Avignon. We have 5 women here in various states of undress, staring at you, the viewer. Now again, this makes sense because he is going to be in these unsavory red light districts, and these women are prostitutes, and they're come out for you, the viewer, to choose. And we have a variety of different ways of looking at these women. These 2 faces are very similar, but then we've got these other 3 faces that seem very mask-like. A lot has been made over how Picasso's work is influenced by African masks. The interesting thing is that Picasso always denied this. He always said that he alone came up with this, that there was no outside influence, there was no influence from the African mask. but a lot of people really say that there's a lot more to this. And Picasso is not one to share credit. He has quite a big ego. He also has interesting views on women. So we see various angles of these women's faces at the same time. You'll have maybe a frontal eye and a side nose, and then you have things like the breast here that seems to almost be separated from the body, and that has to do with the fact that shadow is in the wrong place. So you have these body parts that are abstracted into these shapes. But one of the main things with Cubism is, again, the various angles combined unnaturally. Interestingly enough, this piece originally started out as a piece that had the sailor in the front, and before him he was sitting at a table with some fruit, and then the women were coming out of some brothel curtains. And we know this because of some of the early drawings that Picasso did. So he definitely changed it. So eliminating the sailor makes you, the viewer, in his position, that you are sitting there with the fruit in front of you, and you are making the decision on which of these women. And so that really changes things. It makes it a lot more controversial and a lot more in your face. The other thing to know about this is the size. This is not a small piece. It is 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet. This is a large scale work. That's very important. This is a very in-your-face piece. These are some comparisons, and you'll find lots of comparisons with Picasso's pieces to various African masks. These are just a handful, just to show you that the chance of him being influenced by these African masks is very high, especially because he did write in his journal about going to these museums and seeing these things. So probably was influenced. George Braque. Braque and Picasso, think of them as the Lennon and McCartney of artists. So they both were friends, with a little hesitation there. So they were friends, they spurred each other on. They really worked well whenever they were trying to kind of compete with one another. So they would, Braque actually lived just around the corner from Picasso, so they would oftentimes visit each other's studio. But then when they did, they would then go back and then try to do bigger and better things. George Braque's The Portuguese. This is actually depicting a man holding a guitar. So you can kind of see some of these elements. So you can have kind of the face here. We have an arm. You can see part of the guitar here. These elements have been abstracted into these shapes, and again, the different angles of these shapes. This is called analytic cubism, where the piece is broken down into essential forms composed of small cubes. You'll also notice that we've got some elements from a sign in the background. So we have Grand Ball, or part of that right here. That's from a popular poster at the time. And the admission to the Grand Ball was right here, 10 francs and 40 centimes. And then we also have in the background some of the shapes that kind of reference. Here in the back, we also notice that it looks like there's shapes from a ship, because there's the idea that there's a window there and the harbor can be seen from that. So this is supposed to be depicting a guitar player in a Marseille bar. So obviously it's not easy to decipher what all these elements are. We can decipher some of these. The other type of cubism is synthetic cubism. This is more like a collage of piecing things together to create a piece. So analytic is more like breaking apart, synthetic coming together. And again, the best example of synthetic cubism is a collage like this. So this is another one by Pablo Picasso, guitar, sheet music, and wine glass. So you can see the outline of this guitar, you can see the hole here. There's part of the sheet music, and obviously a drawing of a wine glass. So one of the things that Picasso starts doing in 1912 is to create these synthetic cubist pieces by collaging together these various types of paper. So he will take found objects like this piece of music. He'll also do drawings. This is a drawing that he did. And then he also would cut out these shapes out of this type of paper. It's almost like the old contact paper you might have used in elementary school. It was becoming popular at the time, and so that's what this kind of synthetic wood-looking piece is. And this is some old wallpaper, and so you have these all kind of combining together. So then we have the newspaper here on the bottom. We have Les Jours, part of the title for Le Journal. It was the newspaper, basically. But Les Jours, or jouer in French, means to play or toy, depends on if you're talking about a verb or a noun. So jouer, to play, or jouet is toy. So that's interesting that he decided to cut it off there. You'll also notice that headline that we've got here. La bataille s'est engagée. That means the battle has started. This is referring to the war in the Balkans against the Ottoman Empire. So this is a three-dimensional piece that he did called a violin. This could also very much be considered synthetic cubism, as we're adding pieces together. We have these various pieces of flat or bent metal that he has attached to one another in order to create the rough outline of a violin. German Expressionism. Expressionism is meant to invoke a mood or idea. It's supposed to express meaning of an emotional experience, not reality. Here we have Paula Modersohn Becker. This is her self-portrait. So again, it's not meant to be realistic. It is meant to invoke an experience, not reality. We've got, again, maybe some of the colors are a little unnatural, especially in the face. We have these almost too peachy, too pink colors added in there. We also have the flowers. And of course, flowers are a symbol of fertility. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Street, Dresden. Kirchner is actually using the Fauvist idea of colors, but it's very much meant to express an emotional experience. The Fauvists, they really didn't try to bring about any kind of experience or have any particular emotion they're trying to depict. Again, the colors were just totally random. Kirchner he's actually trying to be disturbing. We really have this very disturbing piece in a lot of respects. One is because of the colors he chose, this almost neon color of yellowish green, very disturbing as it's especially played in the faces of some of these women. The woman here is actually a prostitute. She's lifting up her outer skirt, showing her petticoat as a way to signal that she is on the clock, if you will, to you, the viewer. The other disturbing aspect of it is this lone child here. The idea is what's going on with the child. Is the child lost? It is meant to be, again, very disturbing. Kirchner oftentimes used prostitutes, the idea of aloneness, desolation. He used a lot of these things in his pieces. Milno, this is his version of The Last Supper. It's a very crowded piece. Everyone is around a round table versus a long table. And we really don't get a good sense of the people's faces. Again, a little disturbing. A lot of that kind of greenish coloration, not meant to be highly realistic. Eric Heckel, Crystal Day. We have these asymmetrical jagged shapes, very simplified piece here. There's a young woman, there's a lake here, and we can tell that it's a lake because we have this great reflection of the cliffs over here in the lake, and then the clouds in the sky. So we still can tell what is going on in this piece. Here's another Kirchner piece. This is Peter Schmechel, Tribulations of Love. This is an illustration for a book, Peter Schmechel's Wondrous History by Adalbert von Chamisso. So this is kind of a variation of a Faustian story. So Peter sells his soul for a pot of gold. We have in this piece Peter, we have a young woman behind him. Again, it's very disturbing because of the thick black lines and the periodic use of red. So we have this young woman behind him with her long hair behind, her head tilted back, but then we have this streak of reds with the sense of maybe she's bleeding, is she dying, she's nude. We do have red again on her hand, so the idea is maybe again that she's dying, but then wait, he's got red on himself. So what does that mean? Especially red on the lips, contrasting with what's behind him. So what is the story here? It's meant to be a very violent, disturbing image. Der Blue Reiter, or the Blue Rider. This is another German expressionist group. Vasily Kandinsky and Franz Marc are two of the big names here. The aim of this group is to focus on spirituality, and they were really active in Munich from December 1910 to March 1911. So again, very, very short amount of time. There were only 2 official shows, and they did not get good reviews. This is Vasily Kandinsky's sketch 1 for composition 7. Yes, this is how he named most of his pieces. It's very abstract. We have lots of various colors and lines. There is no recognizable imagery in here. This is one of 10 compositions that he did while listening to some Wagner. And at this point, I am sad that we didn't get a chance to do the music integration that I normally do with this class. But so one thing you need to know about Wagner is his very racist views. Because of that and some other things, Hitler was a huge fan of Wagner. Wagner becomes one of the officially sanctioned music of the Nazi Party. So there's a lot of bad overtones with Wagner's music. But again, this does predate Nazis. So we have this piece, very abstracted. There's nothing you can really tell in here. I mean, you might be able to kind of imagine something, but nothing. But I also wanted to show you an earlier piece. So this is just a few years before. This is Sketch for Composition 2, 1910. So in this, he's still playing with lines and colors, but very recognizable shapes. Okay, so not every shape you can maybe recognize, but we have some distinct people and some figures and animals here. And then we've got trees. We have a lot of things that we can recognize. In just a couple of short years, he goes from this to this. Total abstraction. Now we have Franz Marc. This is Animal Destinies. Or the trees showed their rings, the animals their arteries. So again, kind of a disturbing piece in that respect. So he started interweaving animals in his pieces by 1911, and very much by 1912, most of his pieces have these animals integrated in. He does have some Cubist influence, obviously, here. We've got some foxes over here. We have a deer over here, some pigs, some horses, and what this is the idea of a hunt. We have a hunt going on in the forest. Obviously, we've got a couple trees here, and then the animals, their arteries. So we've got this kind of blood spilling and this red kind of shooting through this center section. Paul Klee, the Nissen. He was Swiss. He actually did this piece on a trip to Tunisia. He was fascinated by the bright light and color of North Africa. We saw a lot of Impressionists were as well. He was very much interested in art by children, folk art, not trained artists. We do have a couple of interesting symbols up top. We do have the Islamic crescent moon. We have the Jewish Star of David. We also have these sun images up here. And then, of course, a pyramid as well. So we have these very simplistic symbols along with the color. Austrian Expressionism. This is Oskar Kokoschinka. This is the Bride of the Wind. So again, you can see the expressionist aspect here of this couple that is laying there. You can definitely tell that they are, but you can't tell where they're laying. Their setting is completely abstracted into these kind of swirls of color, of paint. It's again kind of thick blotches of paint. You'll also notice how many colors are being used to create the skin tone. Egon Schiele. Self-portrait, or man twisting arm around head. Egon's another interesting one. So this is a self-portrait. That in itself tells you a lot, because the man that he's depicting is gaunt. So much so that we have bones sticking up. We have the bone sticking of his arm, of his collarbone, of his ribs. This is a young man who has not been eating. Even the face is very gaunt and bony, and the look on his face is very determined but dark. He endured a lot during his life. He actually watched his father's very painful death from syphilis, and then became preoccupied with sickness and mortality. He attended the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He was a student of Gustav Klimt. Ended up dropping out of school and forming New Kunst Group, or New Art Group. He is well known for these images of nudes, of himself, lovers, prostitutes. This piece is from 1910. Again, we have this very defiant glare. He's 20 at the time. We have, again, the ribs, almost his skeleton that's confronting us here. And it is a very confrontational piece. We don't have a lot of pieces by him because in 1918, as we are all very much aware at this point, was a pandemic of influenza. This ended up killing his pregnant wife 3 days before it killed him. 20 million people died worldwide because of that pandemic. Well, this is under the heading of Cubism in Paris after Picasso and Braque. So we do have some people kind of coming after. Robert Delaney, pieces tend to be very, I think, hopeful and very happy, and I think that has to do with the primary colors that he likes to use. This is Hommage to Blériot. So Louis Blériot was a French aviator. He was also the inventor of the modern single-wing airplane. He was the first to fly across the English Channel. And so we see there's the airplane here. Oh wait, there's another airplane here, and there's a propeller here. And then you can really kind of think of all of these circles as maybe propellers that are in motion. And we have all of this kind of moving together. And of course he is French, so we have the symbol of France, the Eiffel Tower there. Robert Delaney, again, very abstracted, somewhat cubist piece. He had originally been part of the Blue Reiter group, and then kind of moved on from there. He likes to put these primary and secondary colors next to each other, which of course we know kind of activates them, makes them move, and in this case has a sense of movement, which helps because of the airplane.